For all attending, we'll get underway with the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting for the 26th of November. I'll get Tracy to open with a KARAKIA. Thank you, Tracy.
Chair, whakataka tahau ki te uru, whakataka tahau ki te tonga. Ke mā kina kina ki uta, ke mā taratara ki tai. I hi aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora.
Thank you, Tracy. Health and safety. I think everybody in the room is well aware of our health and safety policy. Our guests won't be arriving till later on, so we'll move past that. Thanks, Dave. Apologies. So far we have an apology for Bruce Clarkson for lateness, Pamela Story for early departure, and Katarina Hodge. Any other apologies? Is Clyde online? Clyde's and Angela are online. Thank you. Mover. Yep. Thanks, Michael. And second, and thanks, Chris. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Right. The meeting today. We just a bit of an overview. We have one decision item that's on the FDE item coming up in 7.2. The rest are just information only items as we move through. Our guests now won't be arriving until 10:30 due to a change in circumstances. That's from Te Ura KAHIKA. And we are scheduled for lunch at about 11:30, so it is a fairly light agenda. Was there a note there? Yep, got it in there. So I'll move the confirmation agenda. Thanks, Chris. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest from anyone with any items coming up in the agenda? Take that as a no. Thank you. And we have some minutes from the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on the 2nd of October to receive and confirm. Thanks, Mikhail. Seconded. Thank you, Noel. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. And the second set of minutes is from the submission subcommittee on the 24th of October. I'm happy to move those as recorded. Thank you, Jennifer, as a second. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. It won't be our first one. Yep. Right, moving on. So this is our item on the farm dairy effluent application. We have Malcolm McLeod joining us and Hayden. As you'll be aware, we've had a workshop and also a report come to Strategy and Policy. And so this is the follow-up that came out of that workshop and report. So I'll hand over to you, gentlemen, unless Tracy, you wanted to do an open note. Malcolm and Hayden. Right-hand button, that's it. And nice and close, thanks, Malcolm, with that mic, just so that everyone online can hear as well.
We have the first slide, please. And the next one. So in early October, the Strategy and Policy Committee canvassed issues relating to the upgrade or the removal of Waikato Regional Council's web farm dairy effluent risk map. And at that meeting, we were asked for further information on, well, who's actually using the FDE application map? Could we get any synergy from using our summer students, the summer related to the peat field work? And there are also some issues, dairy and effluent storage calculator tool. And so at this stage, I'm going to outline the response relating to these issues. Next slide, please. So just a quick reminder about the soil risk framework for farm dairy effluent application. You can see the 6 classes. There's only 2 risks, high and low. And the high ones are on the left-hand side in red. The first 2 essentially pertain to drainage troubles, and Class C is on sloping land with slopes greater than 7 degrees. Right-hand side in green, D and E are low-risk soils on land which has got slopes less than 7 degrees. And in 2020, the tool was upgraded to accommodate low-risk peat soils. And for all those categories, there's rates and depths of application that you can use. Next slide, please. So who actually uses our FDE map? Well, there are nearly 1,500 views last financial year, and that's about 4 per day, but sometimes it can be up to 16 views per day. And I talked to the dairy industry and consultants, and the takeaway message is that the consultants with strong GIS skills maintain their own SMAP and LiDAR files. But others rely on our map, especially to start client interactions. And I was thinking about this the other day. The consultants with the strong GIS skills, they're probably the larger consultants, such as AgFirst, and they've got a range of people, and some have got these good GIS skills. This last little bit that I've got on the bottom here, that comes out of SMAP. So all the SMAP units are tagged with the farm dairy effluent risk category. And you can see it says C, and so that's a high risk if the slopes are greater than 7 degrees, otherwise it would be a low risk. And we've got to remember that SMAP doesn't tell us necessarily anything about slope. So soils are soils, slopes are slopes. And that's why we've got to use both SMAP and the LiDAR files to work this out. And yep, thanks. Next slide, please. So turning now to Council Soil Risk for FDE application map, we've got to remember it's a regional scale map and it's intended to be broadly indicative only. But you need a farm scale map with site-based assessment, and we get that out of the pocket guide. It was created in about 2011, which is quite some time ago. It uses the old New Zealand Land Resource Inventory soil and slope data, and it's based on the soil risk framework. So just to put that in context, the map units in the LRI are tagged with a slope class. And so one map unit has got one slope class. But now we've got this SMAP coverage for much of the region and LiDAR derived slope information. And the council's invested heavily in that. So the SMAP and LiDAR could be used just as a desktop exercise to update the risk map. But remember, it's still going to be regional scale, not paddock scale. And we don't have a basis for the differentiation of these peat risk soils. And the carbon stocks work that's going to be done this summer, it's going to be point data at predefined points, and therefore it can't be used on a regional basis. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to show you, this comes out of the Carlson report, and to be a low risk peat soil, we need a water table greater than 50 centimetres depth. And you can see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, there's 10 points there over about say 3 paddocks. Unfortunately, Carlson didn't put a scale on this, but I think there's probably 3 paddocks there. And you can see if our summer students go somewhere there, you know, you don't know what you're going to get. And so you can either say, oh, well, this is going to be a high risk or it's going to be a low risk soil. But also that work was done in spring when you anticipate that your water table is going to be at the highest depth. So our summer students are going out over summer.
Malcolm, just for my clarification, so what are those numbers indicating?
Those
Are they
the depth
the
of
water
the water table?
Water table depth. Okay, thank you.
Water table depth, yeah. So you can see they range essentially from 13 to a metre.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. No, those were done in spring. Yeah. But our students will be going out in summer where the water table could be lower. So that's why I don't believe that the summer field work can give us much information, and it's only going to be 35 points over the whole region. Oh, it's for a completely different reason to look at our carbon stocks.
Can you guys use your microphones, please, if you're going to speak? Thank
Sorry,
you.
my question was why do it? And the reality there has to be a huge caveat underneath it, you know. Not comparable.
No, the summer students are working on a completely different project.
It is in the report, not what it's been.
Sorry, if I can just add here through you, Mr. Chair. We explained at the last meeting the reason why our summer students go out and what that program is for. There was a question around, could we get them to just do this work? Also, what Malcolm is saying is the purpose for which we engage our summer students, quite different to this add-on. So I just want to be clear, the purpose that the summer students are going out for is for a very good purpose. It's just not for the purpose that we investigated it, because council asked us, and we've just said the Venn diagram doesn't overlap, essentially.
Yep, Chris.
Just for my education, if our testing is going to be done in summer, one would expect that the water table is going to be lower than centimetres. Means that those soils will be low risk. Is that how it operates?
No, the risk is a yearly risk. So we can't just say, oh, at this time.
But the irrigation's done in the summer. You don't do irrigation in winter. So you're not going to spread your effluent around the paddocks during winter. You're only going to do it during summer. Yeah, so you're not going to store as much as you can until summer, aren't you? That's
Guys, one at a time, please, and get a mic.
I'm just trying to get an answer from our experts. Get the expert to us.
But the ones that are legally, the ones that have got storage have got 90 days. So no matter what, any time in the year, you're going to have to irrigate. So just make it clear that just because you've got storage doesn't mean you don't have to irrigate. I just want to make that clear. So you've still only got 90 days storage. So even in some adverse weather events, you're going to have to irrigate. So you are going to have to irrigate in wet conditions.
Can I get that mic back, Robbie?
Yeah, go for it.
So just a point of clarification, then, if you work back 90 days from summer, so summer starts on the 1st of November or 1st of December, you go back 90 days, get to the end of August, which means you're probably not milking anyway, you're just starting to milk, so your storage should be empty.
Unless you've got rain diverters, you're storing all that water all winter. So every time it gets 100 mils of rain, it's running off your yard into your storage pond. So it doesn't work like that, Chris. Sorry.
So we've got to the bottom of that there. Thank you. Thanks, Malcolm. Carry on, please.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So turning now to the dairy effluent storage calculator, it takes into a range of factors, including your soil risk information. obviously is based on the pocket guide. It runs on daily time steps. And it was produced about 2015, and it does mention that you should use this pocket guide. Talks about SMAP, sibling fact sheets, and the necessity to have a farm scale soil map. The next slide, please. So in conclusion, we do have a scientifically robust framework in place, and it's based on the guidance for the field-based assessment produced by Dairy NZ, and that was updated about 4 years ago to accommodate those low-risk peat soils. And so we recommend that Council's FDE risk map is updated as a geospatial desktop exercise, and we use SMAP and the LiDAR slope at a regional scale. And to reiterate that the council has invested heavily in both SMAP and LiDAR, and also that we approach Dairy NZ to discuss the version and update of the storage calculator guide, because things have moved on since it established.
I just asked a question on that. Desktop exercise. Does anyone go out in the field and actually validate the desktop exercise at some stage?
No, the modelling which is done to give us the underlying SMAP, that's field validated. But in the fact sheets, they run an algorithm over all the data to give us the FDE risk category.
I've got a speaking order. Can I get you guys to kill your mics? Thanks.
Is
Cheers.
there a risk? What's the risk with that logarithm process? It's plus or minus 1 or 2%, or is it 10, 20, 30%?
I don't know, and I guess that's Anaki Whenua-Lankia researchers' IP.
Can I get you to leave your mic on, because the questions are going to come thick and fast. Thanks, Bill. Stu.
I just want to move the 2 recommendations, please.
Thanks, so noted. Jen.
Thanks. Appreciate, I've learned a lot about this. I thought I would. I want to take us back to the beginning of where this all came from, which is that somebody came in and said that the map had too many high risk areas on it. Now, I really do support the second part of that recommendation about talking to Dairy NZ and making sure all the disclaimers are right. But I haven't got anything in this paper to say what it costs to update, do this desktop exercise, who actually benefit, whether they're the ones paying for it or if it comes out of general rates. Because when I look at paragraph 32, the first sentence says, even an updated soil risk map will still only provide regional scale information, back to the same situation. And the last sentence says on paragraph 32, it's likely all organic soils would necessarily be shown as high risk in an updated map. So we're still in the same situation. So I want to know that it's worth doing the A part of the to get an outcome, and what it would cost and pay for that. Maybe that's more for Tracy, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we could probably
Why are we doing it? The extra benefit.
Yeah. We're not using the most up-to-date information that's sitting on the map now. It's quite old, and yes, it covers the whole whole region, whereas now using land cover database 5, we can easily pick out areas which are high producing grasslands, therefore target just those areas. And we cannot give paddock scale information. That's up to consultants and farmers if they wish.
My concern is we'll do some work and we'll still end up with a static map that looks pretty much the same. That's where where's the benefit?
Yeah, I think the map will look quite different because we're using LiDAR, and so the big soil map units broken up into detail, and the soils information will be, because we're using SMAP, which the council is.
And those that will benefit from what I'm reading will be those consultants who initiate conversations to do some work.
Yes.
Not so much the other ones that are. Okay. In that case, how much does it cost us to do a desktop exercise? And you know, since you're probably going to build that into the annual plan budget, or you're going to not do something else, is that a significant worth it? That's where I'm trying to get to. Because otherwise I'll just move it to have only the B part of that recommendation rather than all. But if it's worth it, then let's do all of it.
From my understanding, what we've heard is answered some of those concerns that came through the previous workshops, where we want to use the most up-to-date data that we have got. We understand the scale issues, and that one of the other things I'd just like to raise and come back to the costing side of your question, Jen, but one of the suggestions from Fred Phillips was the possibility to actually third colour the peat soils area as in yellow. The onus still being on farmers and consultants to identify those soil types and what's actually at farm scale level. But is that something that would be worth looking at? Yeah, Hayden, you've seen.
Excuse me, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of the cost. So what we're talking about is in-house work, so staff time. We haven't calculated the cost, but we don't anticipate it would be a considerable amount of time for the staff involved. So that's on the cost side. And in terms of the point around adding a third class, we don't think that would be appropriate, because essentially what that could be quite misleading in terms of essentially categorising the peat soils as somehow not quite the same as high risk, where, you know, even though quite a substantial proportion of that area, those soils will be high risk. And so in terms of what we're recommending, we're taking a precautionary principle. It's not possible for us with a desktop exercise to map out the difference between high and low risk peat soils. That would require on the ground survey of the entire peatland area and have very significant cost, 6-figure plus would expect. So in terms of what we're able to do in this context, I think a precautionary principle, and the key point is that what we've recommended all the way along is that no matter where a property is in relation to this risk map, a site-specific assessment of the soil risk should be undertaken to determine, to calculate the storage requirements. So whether it's high risk, low risk, on-site assessment is required. This is regional scale information that this is part of what we do. We provide soil information at the regional scale. SMAP is at the regional scale. There's a range of uses. We just have to recognise the limitations of that. We don't think it would be appropriate for the ratepayer to cover the cost of farm to paddock scale mapping. To give that level of detail, we're working at the regional scale.
Ben, can I just get you to kill your mic for a minute? I'll get Tracy to make a bit of a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to follow up on the comment that Hayden made there in regard to the cost that it would be in an internal exercise. So it really is something that we'd look to our spatial information team and the wizards that sit in that team in regard to looking at the data, the SMAP data, the LiDAR data, and using some of the smarts and talking with Hayden and Malcolm. So it really is a challenge that we'd throw their way. The spatial information team has, I guess, an allowance in their labour budget of any 1 year for requests such as this. They tend to get filled, obviously, from across the organisation, and there are a bunch of priorities, but it is something that we believe could fit within the work programme. When and what month, I couldn't tell you, but there is capacity in there to answer and to do this kind of work.
Thanks, Tracy, and also noting the number. I mean, there was over 1,400 views of our map online, so it is being used by a lot more people rather than just the larger companies. Yeah, Ben.
Oh, from what I remember, when we saw the map up on screen, almost all of the Coromandel and the Mamakus were in red because they're over 7 degrees. Is there some way of removing the dockland from the map altogether?
Yes, we would use Land Cover Database version 5 to concentrate only on the grassland area.
Okay, and when this work is done, will it fall into the spatial strategy inventory project? Is it going to help with that? That's the thing for Tracy.
The simple answer is yes, because that project's looking at all our spatial data, but it will be focused on what is the most important spatial data that we need. As you'll appreciate, there's a good 1,000 odd layers, and which are the most important layers to inform the strategy of where we're going.
Thanks, Tracy. Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, really just picking up on a point that Jens raised and just following up on that. My understanding is that our map is being used, and it's pretty obvious it's being used pretty widely by these people that sell services to the farmers as a tool, as a sales tool. And that's why the issue was raised in the first place, because it is misleading. It's being used as a tool against the farmers to say, you need this. And they don't. In some cases, they don't need it. So I'm suggesting that we need to make sure there is a very clear explanation attached to the map, and I think we covered that, which explains its limitations, and to please go and consult with somebody appropriate rather than just taking on the advice from somebody who doesn't actually understand the topography and type of the soil. And the other thing I'd really like to see that, and I'm not sure whether you've actually covered it, but I'd still like to see 3 colours on there, which takes out the 7 degree, because that is, to me, it's a different type of category. It is high risk, we know that, and just needs to be classified as such. And I would also be interested in what the estimated cost is. Thank you.
Robbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I agree with what Chris just said then. I'd actually like to see something stamped on the map that it actually says what it's to be used for. When they pull it up, and if they download it, there's a thing called like draft, blah, blah, that it actually makes it that you, when they pull that frame up and they put it into a farm and say, you need to put it in storage because of this, and it says, no, you can't do it. That's what it needs to have on it. And I think if it's something clear like that, then we'll be safeguarded from people misusing our map for unfair reason. And I think that's what we need to stamp on it, that anyone that downloads it or pulls it up just says whatever it needs, that they cannot use it for this information. It's an overview of the whole region, not farm specific or even area specific. Please get a consultant to assess your property, blah, blah, blah. That's what it needs to happen.
Have you seen what's there now?
No.
What has been changed?
No, but it is really important that that's what takes place.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so following the last committee meeting, There was an action around putting a caveat both on our on our website that provides a link to the map, and we also had the caveat attached to the map itself. So when a user accesses the map from our Waikato maps and the about information that explains what that map is for and what it's based on, has that caveat sitting there now.
Yep, so I'd just like to thank staff for following up on that action, because it is something that we did request and it has been done.
But like Chris said, though, it'd be good if the peat area was marked different in a different colour, but not to say that it just needs assessing correctly. It's, like, because as you said, there is some there that are actually in the other status, but it's not marked. So it should be there's peat areas in either one of these status, but you need to do your personal assessment.
I think that's true for all soils.
Yeah.
And so to have another colour could be misleading. There are only two risk categories, high and low.
Well, then it must, and we need to determine very precisely and correctly the wording and the person that is using this information, their obligations of giving out correct data from it or something.
I'd like to suggest the councillor actually reads what's on the website and on the map currently, and then perhaps comes up with, oh, here you go. Perhaps if he requires alternate wording, then help submit something. Yeah, Tracy.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, I think also as part 2 of the recommendation, conversations with Dairy NZ and other practitioners, perhaps getting some collateral out so we clearly explain that might also be useful as well, around to our agricultural practitioners, to reiterate exactly what Councillor Cookson's saying, just so there is absolute clarity around what the map should be used for, how it should be interpreted, and what it should not be used for. I think that's something that we can do as a bit of a mail drop out to our agricultural practitioners.
Thanks, Tracy. Noel.
Thank you. For me, looking at how Fred brought this up to start with and the discussion, the workshop and the paper, stepping back for a moment, it says to me, what is this map and the accompanying references and whatever really trying to set out to do? And all it to me is saying, here's an awareness, and the reality is we can only give you this at regional level, so you need to do your work on your farm. And that's the way I've simplified it to myself. So the reality is, I think we're worrying too much and probably spending too much time on it. Step back, what is it really trying to do? It's saying, from my recollection, the initial map came up pretty much all red, it was all high risk. And if that can't be refined to a degree, it's pretty much saying to me, just say, guys, ladies, if you're doing something in this area, upgrading your effluent ponds, whatever, you need to do some on-farm work to satisfy those who need to be satisfied that you can do what you want to do. End of story. So are we overcomplicating it?
Thanks, Noel. So just one final thing. I don't think there's any. No.
Please just don't overcook it with that desktop exercise.
You want to discuss something on the way forward that is in the recommendation? I don't think it is being overcooked or complicated. I'll come back to our director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe we've overcomplicated it. I believe we've taken a pragmatic approach, following up on an issue that councillors wanted to follow up, where we only had 5 minutes in the LTP. We've had the workshop, we've understood the issue, and as Councillor Nichols said, now understanding the issue more than probably it was put to councillors at the LTP. I think we've taken a pragmatic approach, noting that our role is that regional scale information, and it is the start of the process. Also just wanted to take councillors back to, we had Evan Wellington from upstairs, who said it is not a simple calculation. There is a number of things that need to be taken into consideration. So I think we've taken a pragmatic approach. I think any more than what we're recommending potentially would go to the complicated end of the continuum.
So that's my point. The reality is you need to get on and do some work on your own property to make sure you satisfy the requirement.
Thanks, Noel. And I'd just like to add Fred Phillips' thanks to staff and councillors for actually identifying it and investigating what is a really important issue. So he sends his thanks in that space. So we have a mover and a seconder for that items on screen 1 and 2.
Could I just have a movers wrap up, please?
Sorry?
Movers wrap up,
Yep.
please. So just want to comment, really happy with the recommendations. I did find it very frustrating, to put it bluntly, that Fred put it across at the beginning of the thing that our information was precluding or preventing farmers from, I guess, making them put in more effluent storage than they really needed to. And that's pretty frustrating when you look at point 18 on the agenda. Very clearly tells the dairy effluent storage calculator, Dairy NZ's one, clearly encourages farmers to do all that stuff that we're just hearing about, and it does not mention the use of WRC soil risk map farm dairy effluent. So, as I said, happy with where we're going, but really frustrating that the accusations that were put across by Fred that day he came in here, were clearly quite untrue. I think we need to note that, please.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'd call them untrue as such. That he raised concerns. He raised concerns in his LTP submission.
Well, he clearly said to us, that's what he said to us. So.
He clearly asked us to investigate what we currently have on our
with that,
website, which is what we've done.
But he also very clearly said to us that our mapping was making farmers put on more effluent than they needed to, which was quite untrue. That's what he said, eh?
Okay, I think so. We'll move on. So all those in favour?
I just wanted to comment that the one thing I took from that was that the map was all red, and that was ridiculous for the region. So that was a useful exercise to go through, and I'm happy to.
And I think it's got us to a good place. Thank you. So all those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Right, the next item before us is the Regional Spatial Strategy Inventory Project Scope and Progress. It's an information report. It is page 33 of your agenda. You want people online to hear?
That I've seen in front of us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Malcolm does have 40 years experience. He knows what he's talking about, and is one of our wonderful science communicators, and that he can take those technical concepts and relay them in a story that's relevant. So councillors, you've got me just doing a quick presentation here before I pass over to Hannah to take you through the report. Just wanted to briefly overview what the Regional Spatial Strategy Project is. This slide that you've got in front of you is taken directly out of our LTP consultation document. So just a reminder of that. There is lots going on. There will continue to be lots going on. We have a project with a project plan that's signed off through the LTP. Just want to put a few things into perspective. A couple of councillors have also asked me around timeline of this. Everybody wants a spatial plan. Everybody wants it by Tuesday. It's not quite as simple as making that happen quite so swiftly. Dave, if we could grab the next slide, sorry. It's on the hard stuff. This is an example for you of, and you can't read it.
Of a poor slide that no one can read.
And it's not meant to be able to be read, but it is meant to be acknowledged that each of those boxes is a representation of different councils and their parts of spatial planning that they are doing for their TA. Now, none of those necessarily talk to each other. They are all individual projects related to TA boundaries that don't really connect and provide a regional picture. When you have a government, both the previous and existing government wanting to get a regional picture, at best we've got 42 different things that don't necessarily work in the same direction, aren't cognizant of the same matters, are very important to local communities, and we must recognise that, but regionally we don't really have an idea of how they click together. Are they all seeking to achieve the same direction? Next slide there, Dave. This is really just a representation. On the left, we have all our individual territorial authorities that we have the privilege of providing that regional lens. On the right is really just showing, well, the large arrows there are our transport corridors and also our movement of goods and services throughout the region. They don't obey TA boundaries. How do we have a plan for making sure that that can continue? And there are some hatched circles, oblongs, on the diagram on the right that basically says, look, there may be different areas that we need to focus on given different sectors and different matters that we may be addressing. And as a region, we need to be mature enough to say, well, look, the Coromandel and Hauraki might talk about a particular topic that actually doesn't necessarily be talked about from those in Taupo, Waitomo, Otorohanga, South Waikato. We know their coalition in terms of the growth of their areas may be with regional councils that aren't us. So it's just that maturity of understanding spatial matters don't tend to stop at TA boundaries. Next slide, Dave. Sorry, can you jump back to the previous one? Sorry, Dave. So just here, we have been to the Mayoral Forum. The Mayoral Forum responded positively back in May. Now we know there are things that are happening, but there are things that will chop and change throughout the project. Nothing ever in the local government world all starts in the same place and moves at the same time. It is never sequential. We need to just make sure that these other things are building a wider regional picture. The approach that we had placed in the business case and that we had endorsement for, which was to gather the evidence base so we can find out really what are those information layers we have, and Hannah will take you through that shortly in terms of some of the questions we're asking, and we're keen to get your feedback, and also what some of those information gaps are, because if we have significant gaps, we are exposed and we might not make the right decisions. Thanks, Gabe. This was a preliminary scoping that we did as part of the project parts to inform the LTP. So what our current state is, identifying those gaps, our infrastructure priorities, then actually getting into the spatial strategy and the regional spatial plan proper. Thanks, Dave. You gifted our Chief Executive KPI, which has subsequently become a KPI that Lizette and Hannah and the team have grabbed that taonga and making it happen. So the purpose of today is to really give you an update of how we're going to meet the first part of the strategy and then, sorry, the first part of the KPI, and then the second part, which is, okay, so now that we've got the evidence base, what does the framework look like going forward? That is a simplified diagram down the bottom of the three parts, which is the inventory, getting people together and developing the strategy. Now, we learned from the Waikato plan, you don't start everything with everybody in the room from day one because it just slows down, it doesn't work, and things disintegrate fairly quickly. So at certain times we will bring people along, but importantly, we're getting all the information together at the moment. If we can go to the next slide, Dave, which is an indication of timeline. We have the next 18 months at the top there. This is a diagram I used when ELT was looking at our annual plan for the year. So mindful that we'll be having local government elections next year. We'll have our existing annual plan and our new annual plan. The resource management reform, which is going to come at us thick and fast next year on many topics, and we're just trying to get from the Ministry for the Environment and Minister of RM Reform an actual program of what that might look like, because at the moment we're hearing a few conflicting messages. So we're just wanting to give you an indication at our first meeting of the year what potentially we could look at, but we know that we are likely to get some discussion documents midway through next year, maybe even some draft legislation, with new legislation passed in 25-26. We know that spatial planning is a key part of that new legislation, and there is an anticipation that there will be a spatial plan for the region. So the work we're doing has withstood several governments. Then down the bottom of that slide is the timeline, indicative project timeline, building our inventory, bringing that to you by April, and then developing the framework by June. I'll now pass over to Hannah, who'll take you through the item and the questions posed in the item.
Just before Hannah kicks off, Tracy, is some of the work that we were doing in that Spatial Plan Act 2022, is there, so there's a follow-on
Definitely.
basically, and there's a
Yeah.
amount of information we already have.
Yeah, so what we've seen from the cabinet paper that the government released, they're still very supportive of spatial planning, particularly for long-term infrastructure, corridor protection and investment. And the main criticism, and remember Minister Bishop was on the select committee for the last legislation, so he has quite a deep knowledge of the process followed. It's just the time. Members may recollect that the previous legislation kind of gave us 10 years to get these things worked up, and then, you know, which tranche, there were 3 tranches, which tranche you're going to be, it's going to be 10 years to get your, well, at least 5 years to get your spatial plan in, and then following that, your regional plan. This government's saying 10 years is too long. We think it needs to be shortened. I understand officials are scratching their heads how to make that happen, which is excellent. But there's definitely the value of these spatial plans is there with this government, but just the need to go quicker. So the work we're doing, and I take my hat off to council through the LTP supporting this, means we're not having to start from scratch. This is ongoing.
Thanks, Hannah.
Kia ora koutou, ko Hannah Craven aho. So the purpose of this report is to introduce the committee to the Regional Spatial Strategy, or RSS as I'm probably going to refer to it from now on, the inventory project that we are starting with, and provide a bit of detail on how this fits into the wider, longer term RSS project. So the point of the inventory project, as Tracy's already sort of alluded to, is to set up the region to be proactive in developing an RSS. We know we don't need to start from scratch. Rather, we need an understanding of what information currently exists across the region and what information we need to gather and how we go about doing this. It's about laying the foundations for regional spatial planning, essentially collating information that will form the evidence base for that regional spatial strategy. If you recall the energy inventory from earlier this year, we're envisaging a similar output, a report supported by maps and tables and a series of infographics that identify the key issues for the region, the gaps in the information, and a prioritised list of future work to be undertaken. We'll be looking at ours and our territorial authorities, like Tracy had on that slide, the number of existing plans and strategies. We're looking at GIS databases, long-term plans, etc., really to build that coherent picture of what we're doing, what others are doing, and the state of the region. We have broken the work down into high-level themes that we understand are key to regional spatial planning and the types of things that we want a regional spatial strategy to answer. These themes are set out in the report, them being development and growth, thinking about where things are heading, infrastructure, thinking about what we need to make that happen, the natural environment, thinking about what we need to protect, resilience in terms of both climate and natural hazards, community connections, thinking about what connects people across the region, and culture and heritage. So underlying these themes, we're also looking at population and economic information that will really feed into all of those themes. So underneath those themes in the report, we've set out a list of initial questions that aren't set in stone. They're really just to demonstrate the types of things that we're thinking about right now, and based on, you know, what we are currently thinking the key issues for the region are. Like Tracy said, you'll be seeing the inventory at a council workshop in April to meet that CE KPI date. And the regional CE forum and Waikato Mayors and Chairs forum will be also kept in the loop. And then in terms of next steps, it will be after this initial inventory project that we really start scoping up the wider RSS project. That's when we'll start developing a framework, working closely with the other councils and iwi to really understand what our communities want and how the information we've gathered through the inventory will translate into a spatial plan. Yeah, that's sort of where I had got to add, or if there's any questions about the questions or things that we're thinking about.
We have a few questions. Angela?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Hannah and Lizette and the team for all the work that you're doing. I'm sure that we're building on all the good work that has been done within Future Proof in the sub-region there as well. Tracy, you mentioned transport corridors being mapped. I do recall on one of our FPIC energy workshops, we had people from communication and energy there as well, and they sort of reinforced that maybe we should look at infrastructure corridors instead of saying just transport corridors. You know, because often, you know, some of this communication data is on bridges and the bridges wash out. And just mapping, yeah, energy and that sort of thing. So I would imagine that you've got that under control. And then one other thing that is possibly covered within the community connections as well is just that, to recall through the long-term plan or just before, we had Sport Waikato come in and talk about infrastructure for sports within the Waikato as well. So just wondering, where do those sorts of community infrastructure, how does that fit in with what we're doing and, you know, sort of thing?
Yep, absolutely. So we are definitely not just looking at information that we have in-house. We know that there are organisations everywhere doing things. We're sort of pulling together as much as we possibly can within the time frame. So yes, I think we've got Sport Waikato info already on our list, and we've got connections everywhere that we can reach out to and talk. Yes, definitely on the list.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be quite a major thing there, what we'll end up with. So it's really exciting. So well done.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sport Waikato 18 months ago did some really amazing work on regional facilities. We know that they took that piece of work around many of the councils to try to get funding. They were unsuccessful. Just because they were unsuccessful for the funding, the actual work and the strategy is really sound. So we've got that, and as Hannah said, we are populating that. It's definitely part of the infrastructure. Just want to give councillors confidence that when we're talking about infrastructure, it is all those things that support natural and physical environment. So technology, communications, we know it's one of the main inhibitors to some of our communities being able to contribute regionally. So it's definitely part of it. I think you hit the nail on the head, Councillor Strange. There's so much information out there, so much. It's actually just weeding through it, as Hannah said, to respond to some of those questions we've posed. And we're really wanting to say, hey, are the questions right? Are there other questions councillors believe we should be asking?
That's the social sector of it is quite a big sector for sure. Ben.
Yeah, two questions. First for Tracy. This is an incredibly complex and comprehensive document, and the energy inventory was a great document when it was completed, but it was only one small sector of what you're dealing with. and we're coming up to Christmas now. Are you comfortable that April 2025 is doable? Because you might just end up with 45 maps of all the various, it's incredibly complex to bring this all down into one place by April 2025.
For you, Mr. Chair, yes, you've put the nail on the head. It could be a 5-box volume set with a table. That's not really what we headed for. It won't be a document that is like the Waikato Region Encyclopedia Britannica. It will be focused on what some of those top issues are, but it will also talk to other documents. So much like the energy inventory and the state of the environment report, think of a triangle. The top of the triangle is the kind of wider public collateral. Then the bit in the middle will be kind of a bit more information for those who are curious. And then it'll point to the basis of the triangle, which is the extra for experts and all the detailed report. So that's what we're working to. We know Christmas is close, and we know the end of March, which is the date that Zet and Hannah and the team have set themselves to have a draft. Now, that will come to you in April, and we'll get 2 or 5 stars out of 5 as to whether it hit the mark or didn't. And so we know it will be an iterative process.
Second point is, I'm delighted to see on item 22 that economic information is going to be considered in this document. My concern is that when it talks about development and growth, I'm 19, where are the current and future growth areas and the expected settlement patterns? I'd like to see the economic information setting out where do we get our economic growth from at the moment? Almost an overlay of where we are at the moment to then look at where the future can be. And I wonder, do we have that document, that information internally with our economic development specialists, or is it stuff that we're trying to get from Te Waka that may or may not be available? So where are we at with the current economic situation, where we generate our income from?
We are definitely looking at the economic, like I said, the economic information feeds into all of those sort of themes, and definitely that development growth one is a key one. So I guess we know that we've got a lot of information for certain councils over others. Future-proof, for example, the future-proof councils, there's a lot of economic capacity, demand information. We're going to be pulling all of that together and seeing what the other districts have. We are looking into, at that higher level, Te Waka, what information they have that can feed into it too, but acknowledging that there probably will be some parts of the region where we don't have as good information as others.
So I know that MB and Te Waka both did documents from 2018 on that gave overlays of where maps were and growth and those sorts of things. So even if they're not handing them over, they would be available online, I presume. So yeah, thank you.
Just to add to that, through Mr. Chair, we were successful last year before last in getting $60,000 through Provincial Growth Fund to develop an economic dashboard. So our team, UPA and Blair Keenan, developed that economic dashboard. If you haven't seen it, I will send the link around. And it's basically got economic data current as of last year for every sector, for every TA in our region. And we were specific in the way we set it up. There is a small fee for continual refresh of that data that's met from within our social and economic science budget. So that data is there. And a lot of the data that Te Waka used for a lot of their material was actually sourced from our unit anyway. So as Hannah said, we've drilled in more detail on specific things, we'll source that data, but we've got a pretty good evidence base there. But I will send the link out to the economic dashboard, because that is totally public for everyone to puddle around in.
Thanks, Tracy. I've got Stu and then Jen and then Chris. Stu.
I was just really quickly, really support this work. I'm assuming the likes of our TAs will have a lot of information that's going to be really useful, and I'm assuming there's no IP ownership issues with anything. It's all going to work well from that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're talking with our spatial team about. There definitely is certain parts of information that there's restrictions on parts that can be shared,
Yeah.
but we're definitely, we're working through to make sure that we are able to
Yeah.
share.
So we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
But we being the TAs. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. No, thank you.
Thanks, Stu. Jen?
Thanks. I'd sent through some questions last night, as you saw, Tracy and Warren, which were more to do with the pace, and I suppose I don't need to answer them now as such. It's just that point about making sure this does travel at pace, considering the value that seems bipartisan-wise everyone sees in this work. That we're not doing it on local government time. We are actually going to be one of, the first who have something pretty decent. Then I wonder about the engagement with the TAs and the other councillors at the other TAs on the topic. We could have a think about that for the future.
So we've already presented to the mayoral forum,
Yes.
and I understand that as the mayoral forum and not other councillors. That was purposeful to let us get this piece, this
course, for now.
component done,
Yeah.
but it's definitely part of the KPI that's required by 30 June to
Right.
outline that.
That's awesome. And then just what came up for me was I didn't see in the table of contents there where it might fit, but the community outcomes that all of our TAs have, and they're all at different stages of being updated, might be worth having a summary of that somewhere. Because that's part of that future that we would be then saying that here's a current, here's the future the community said so far that they want to work to. Quite nice to have that as a reference. And my learning over the past while, I think, has been the community outcomes that we have at a regional level fall prey to the same difficulties that most other things do, that when they're at a regional scale, they don't mean that much. So I do wonder what we might do in the future about community outcomes, just thinking long term now about where that goes, and whether the winds of change, is that what was called in the strategy, or the trends of change is mentioned, because that future that we're projecting to is supposed to look a bit different to the past, and so just always keeping that front of mind. And one example being, it's very common to plan for very centralized infrastructure, but it might be the future has a lot of decentralized structure for that result. Last comment and question I had was, we talked in the climate committee last week about Resilience EXCLUDE, wondering whether that is a software that would help with this project or not, and happy to have that answer. I'm just mindful it's another GIS layer of type software, and it has benefits to other parts of this. That'd be great. I'm happy to touch base later if you don't know.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just the one comment I would make is in the preparatory work that the team's done, we did harvest all the LTP documents, and we also sent an email to each of the chief executives from our TAs to say, okay, so what are your district priorities? What's in the LTP, i.e. what are your long-term priorities that you can affect as local government? But what are the actual priorities also for your community that are not just local government driven? So we have
That's awesome.
a bit of a plan of that, of what it looks like. And we just need to continually check in, because they may chop and change with announcements such as the recent announcements at South Waikato. So we are doing that to keep that kind of qualitative information and contextual information current. And we'll talk about Resilience Explorer. I haven't heard, but
Yeah,
I'm sure it's another tool.
Yeah, and when I read this in April, it would just be great to have that summary. So it's great that you're building.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Tracy. Chris, got a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess just a question for Tracy. Really keen to see that report, Tracy, when link up so we can see it. And the question, have you included in the work that went into that, did you talk to business people from around the region? For start, because one of the messages, very clear message I'm getting at the moment, is a huge amount of disquiet and concern around the Hamilton city, and there's quite a move at the moment from big businesses that occupy space to be moving out of the region. I hope that's been picked up in court, because there's significant activity, which is actually relocating out of the city. Basically, because of the rates, it's had a massive negative impact on the value of their properties, and the people are voting with their feet. That'll continue as well.
Yeah, look, we'll send the link out to the economic dashboard, and that is basically, you can interrogate it yourself. And in terms of data on sectors, in terms of, have we spoken to business people? No, not directly, but we dialed into the conversations that Karen has been having in the regional economic development conversations, rather than going out and speaking separately. So we're aware of what information is coming in. The so what does that look like is the next part of the project, and we'll definitely be looking to talk to our usual partners, but also some people who we don't usually talk to, because I think that'll be an important part of the project.
Thanks, Tracy. Robbie, did you have a question?
Question more, just that it's going to be, once the data's collected, it's going to be just interesting where our shortfalls are and where the limitations for our communities are in that data. Just one I've just come aware of recently is like Waikato's, I think we're the biggest growing region in New Zealand, is it? I think, and we don't have a basketball infrastructure for the biggest, fastest growing sport in New Zealand. We haven't got a facility for one. It's a real issue by what I hear around the region, that we haven't got one in Hamilton, and there's not one around any of the Waikato. So all our young sports stars are actually having to go somewhere else to play basketball, to either Rotorua, Bay of Plenty, or Auckland. So and I'm only just because I've been made aware of that, but when we collect the data, it's going to be interesting where all those shortfalls are, if it's sport, industry, or whatever, and how and what the big plan is to resolve some of those issues. Because, yeah, as I said, that one has been made aware to me about the basketball and it's sad that our young are having to go somewhere else to play basketball and the tournaments and to be, better basketball players. So, yeah, sad.
I don't know if you saw the young Oscar Goodman that's just made the Breakers, young fella out of Tairua. So, yeah, we breed him tall up there. Chris?
Yeah, just picking up on the point Robbie's making. Field days used to invest in basketball courts. I'm assuming you're talking about indoor. It's very expensive. The courts are sprung. They're extremely expensive to maintain. They've got to be replaced every so many years. Hamilton City has got, I think it's 2 courts which are available in the Thornton's Event Centre. Once again, the cost of putting them up and taking them down is prohibitive. So, yeah, you've got to be careful what you wish for, I can assure you. But those courts are the courts that we spent probably $500,000 on field days were sold to somewhere in Australia. So it is a really expensive setup cost.
Thanks, Chris.
One of the issues that I found with the spatial planning and the likes is that competing TAs, and my work when I was on the committee between Waikato District and Hamilton City, and talking at that level with their senior councillors and mayors and so on, the reluctance and challenge from the neighbour as to why we wanted commercial or industrial zoning within the Waikato district, where Hamilton was patch protective and wanted everything in the city, and therefore, and then you've got the issues that Chris is raising now about cost to business within the city. It's all fine having this spatial plan, which is reliant on the districts because they really take the lead in it. And I just see this as a coordination and capturing of what's going on. And I see a role with the region as actually helping facilitate those cross-boundary issues, which we were getting to through Future Proof. And that needs to be expanded. And we shouldn't be looking at the artificial lines that somebody in 1989, Brian Elworthy, I think it was, whatever his name was, who drew lines and said that's district, that's city, that's region. We need to be looking at where is the best place for some of this stuff. So unless I see something like that coming out of this project, we're bringing the coordinated and mature discussions across councils then I just see it'll be the same old, same old. So I'm a bit cynical, ladies, but been around a little while, seen it all come and go. But the reality is, I would hope for a lot more than just a stock take of what's going on. Thanks.
Thank you, Hannah. Is at the end of your report. I hope the input from councillors has been helpful in that space, and look forward to seeing what drops out of it in April. So, yep. Thanks, Ben. Second. Thanks, Angela. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much, ladies. Our next item up will be the Te Ura Kahika report. Page, councillors, thank you. Page 22 of your agenda, and we do have two people joining us online, and Chris taking the hot seat.
Thanks, councillors. Not used to being at this end of the table. So I'm just here to introduce this paper. We've got Michael McCartney online. He's the Chief Executive of Manawatu Horizons Regional Council and has been leader of the Regional Chief Executives Forum for many years. And we've got Tom Bowen, who's an Executive Director within Te Ura Kahika, the administrative unit. The regional and unitary councils across New Zealand, all 16 of them, work very well together. We traditionally always have. We used to work together in special interest groups, mainly, which is our technical staff who'd come together to find ways of working across the country. We worked together with the mayors and chairs through the regional sector group, and we've worked with the regional chief executives through the regional chief executive forum that Mike's been leading. And I guess that as it's matured, we've seen the opportunity for an administrative unit to ensure that we're quite well aligned and to do quite a lot of work on behalf of the sector and to try and extract opportunities with central government, one of which, of course, is the Before the Deluge funding, which Michael McCartney and others worked very closely with central government for to achieve, and Shane Jones has acknowledged. I'll throw over to Michael and Tom. Oh, the other thing just before I do is we did have a collab presentation recently, which of course is the shared service, similar type of organisation that provides shared operational services within the region. This is a similar type of concept, and as the paper details what it does. Te Ura Kahika is reasonably new, which Mike might talk to. It's a term you'll have heard bandied around, and this might be a good opportunity to put some more meaning into what Te Ura Kahika is if councillors need.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And just for Michael and Tom online, as a number of us are first-time councillors, yours is an organisation that a number of us haven't come across to date. So obviously interested in the benefits to Waikato Regional Council, and also obviously the amount of funding and staff time that goes into it from a Waikato Regional Council point of view. So I'll hand over to you two gentlemen online. Thank you.
Kia ora everybody. So Michael McCartney from Horizons. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Tom Bowen's joining me today. He'll try and run the presentation, click the slides through. Reasonably sort of high-level presentation on Te Ura Kahika. If I could just first of all just acknowledge your Chief Executive, Chris McClay, who's been a stalwart of the sector for a number of years and worked tirelessly with the RNG, and certainly very strongly respected across the regional sector in terms of his leadership. And also your chair, Pamela, who's been a supporter of the governance arm of the regional sector. So the purpose of this presentation is essentially to outline to elected members, not chief executives or chairs or mayors, because chief executive, chairs and mayors are very familiar with Te Ura Kahika, but what we have discovered and really want to focus on is identifying what Te Ura Kahika does for councils across the spectrum but also as elected members who don't have a regular touch point with Te Uru Kahika, so you get a better understanding of what it is we do and what value we can provide you as an individual council, but also in terms of the wider advocacy for the sector. If I could just say on a personal note, thank you for your great work. I'm a ratepayer in your region, and I really appreciate your work you do in the water quality space, having enjoyed Lake Taupo for many years and the rivers around it. So just thank you from a ratepayer perspective from the outset. Now, the presentation does have a video we'll try to run, which explains the meaning of Te Uru Kahika, and that was gifted to us from Ngā Kairapu, one of our special interest groups in the Māori engagement stick. So we'll run to that to see whether it works. If it doesn't, we'll move on quickly. Well, it looks like the whole thing's collapsed. So
that was being shared from the Waikato Regional Council, and there we go again, I think. If not, I'll pick it up.
Yeah, we'll skip past it, Tom, if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's cool.
Essentially, the video is just Piri Munro, who was at Hawke's Bay Regional Council, who worked as a leader within Ngā Kairapu, our Māori engagement SIG. Basically came up with the concept of Te Uru Kahika, which essentially is the binding roots of the kahikatea tree holding us strong in the ground. So that's the kind of message that he would have conveyed, but it's a special thing because it came from within our sector and gifted to us from Ngā Kairapu. So we'll jump to the next slide.
Well, Michael, we might give it another crack. I think Dave's just on it. We'll just see if it kicks off.
He ao te rangi kauhia, mā te huruhuru te manu karere ai. As clouds adorn the sky, so do feathers enable a bird to fly. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Piri Munro. I'm here today for Ngā Kairapu, the Māori SIG, the Māori Special Interest Group. I'd like to share with you the story of Te Uru Kahika, the new name of regional and unitary councils in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The journey to a connected regional and unitary sector started several years ago with a view to connect our expertise, our relationships with others, and local knowledge collectively drawn on for the well-being of our environment and communities. The shared purpose and vision is to see Aotearoa New Zealand thrive. We work together, we learn from each other, we are stronger in unity than in isolation. He raupo tūtahi ka whati, he raupo kapohia e kore e whati. The single raupo reed is broken easily, whereas raupo bundled together cannot be broken. Ngā Kairapu was invited to participate in naming the regional and unitary sector, and we gifted the name Te Uru Kahika, the grove of kahikatea, the native white pine that is tall and prevalent in wet-prone areas, as a group or stand of trees. Being shallow rooting, each tree is reliant on its neighbour, intertwining one with the other, and in doing so the trees spread their load, standing tall, standing firm, withstanding formidable pressure from outside forces. Te Uru Kahika is a metaphor for the power of our collective efforts as a connected, regional and unitary sector of Aotearoa, New Zealand. E tū kahikatea, stand tall like the kahikatea.
Well, that worked. That's the first time. Great to see. Technology survives. So we'll move to the next slide.
He ao te rangi.
Yep. So essentially, what is Te Uru Kahika? And I think Chris's introduction highlighted the special interest groups. And important to note that we've had a collective arrangement since we were first established way back in '89, and we worked together as a regional council grouping on things like the first regional policy statements. And from that, the special interest groups, where I think the first one that we had was the resource managers group, realised the value of us coming together. So since '89 right through to recent times, we've continued with that special interest group engagement. And what that has provided is a connector point for our professional, skilled staff to work together on common issues. So river engineers come together, harbour master people come together, RNG come together, and it's been ongoing for a number of years, decades in fact. What Te Uri Kahika does is it's an operational arm to support those special interest groups, but also provide a touch point for efficiencies for agencies outside our sector to engage with. So we can speak on behalf of the regional sector, we can engage with government and influence in terms of outcomes, particularly in the policy setting space, or indeed advocacy space. So it's an adjunct to the special interest groups. And because of the scale of the work that we've had, is we realised there was some value in creating an office and equip that office with people to help support that work. So that is the virtual office. So Tom Bowen, Executive Policy Advisor, is one of those staff who work for us. And to give you an example, some of the work that we've done in the last sort of year or so is we've prepared upwards of 11 to 12 submissions to national policy. We've got a few more in train at the moment. And what that does is allows us to express a view common to us all into central government, but also allows councils who don't have the resources to actually leverage off the knowledge from Te Uri Kahika and build on the work that we do and add their local flavour. I kind of want to stress from the outset that Te Uri Kahika does not claim to represent the views of all councils. That's a locally elected member perspective on what views might be. But more often than not, we're more common and aligned on issues than we are different. And where we are different, we respect and identify into government, if we're submitting on something for argument's sake, that those views may be different across our member councils. So it's an important element to highlight. So in the office, we've got about five or six staff working for us in full or part-time capacities. So we've just recently reappointed an executive director, so Ian Maxwell, who Chris will know very well, who is a second tier within Hawke's Bay Regional Council, is now coming across to Te Uri Kahika. So a lot of our staff are from within the sector. Tom is from my council originally, and Al Cross is another one who's working in the policy space, was from Greater Wellington. So our staff are very knowledgeable about the regional sector and have a breadth of understanding across all our respective disciplines. So we'll go to the next slide, Tom. Next slide, yep. So it's pretty obvious what's the value, collective approach, work together. I guess one of the highlights and questions that will arise, so how are we different or the same as LG&Z, for argument's sake? And the difference is that we are here to work alongside LG&Z, but I've been in my role for 20 years now, and to be really honest, the LG&Z provide a very good service, but it tends to be strongly skewed towards TA and city metro type thinking. So we want to support LG&Z, but add our own input that is regional centric, and I think that's an important element to have. The regional council, which at times might have a different perspective than our TAs, to make sure our unique views and work streams are expressed through Te Uri Kahika. Te Uri Kahika is also a support mechanism for our regional chairs and mayors. So whilst it's strongly operationally delivering work for the Chief Executives Collective, it's also drawn into the governance conversation through regional sector meetings on a sort of quarterly basis. So we do provide support in that as well. So I'll go to the next slide, Tom. Some of the specifics that we do and have done, I guess the main one that's always dear to our hearts is attracting funding. So if you go back to post-COVID and the Jobs for Nature initiative, that was a sector-initiated proposal we put into government within a space of approximately a week, when money was being divvied out, and we were, because of our connections, were able to pull together multiple spreadsheets of projects from across the regional sector that would be, to use the coin phrase, spade ready at the time in the climate space, but also in the Jobs for Nature space. That resulted in $1.2 billion worth of work. And I think in the case of Waikato Regional Council, you got circa $50 million worth of that work as well. More recently, the one that Chris McClay highlighted was before the deluge funding. The $1.2 billion infrastructure fund that was signalled The $0.2 billion was always earmarked for regional and unitary council flood resilience projects. And we're working quite a lot behind the scenes to ensure that was ring fenced and protected. And importantly, we advocated at the 11th hour to ensure that that funding was released on a grant basis as opposed to a loan basis. So if you're looking at the infrastructure fund by government, you'll find the bulk of it from a normal infrastructure business will be grant funded, loan funded. So in other words, you'll need to pay it back in some shape or form. For our flood protection investment and before the deluge, the 200 million, that is grant funded. So it is a contribution from government to those works. And I think, again, there's 4 or 5 projects that Waikato Regional Council has benefited from in that space. The other key thing is obviously sharing knowledge and expertise across our sector is really valuable. But for government, having Te Uri Kahika as a connect point, they can contract to us on behalf of the sector, and they've done that. We secured a couple of $1 million worth of funding for the farm plan data management work, then when farm plans were going to be live. So that could then be distributed across the sector. So it allows government to come to one entity and engage and have formal contracts from which funding can be secured. So it makes it far more efficient, and which from there at that point, then we can allocate that funding down into the member councils. We'll go to the next slide. This is probably I've already covered a little bit, but I guess some of the ones that haven't been mentioned is in the transport space, where things like the B card work that we've done collectively has been helped through Te Uri Kahika. I mentioned the flood protection, but also biosecurity, biodiversity. The biomanagers group, which is a construct in the SIG network supported by Te Uri Kahika, has been very successful in securing funding. So again, there's a lot of work that we can draw on multiple skills from across the network and coordinate that through Te Uri Kahika, and none more so than in freshwater implementation, where we can draw upon economic skills, regulatory skills, and also our policy skills across the sector to plug into whatever reforms come out. One of the early initiatives we undertook prior to Te Uri Kahika being established was the LAWA platform. So that's where a lot of our environmental data and information is stored for the public's consumption. Again, that was on the back of us not having a vehicle by which we could express our view and explain to the public things like water quality, where it's good to swim, where it's not good to swim. And LAWA was a product developed probably about 15 years ago now that is still live today and working really well, and there'll be more modules added in the fullness of time. Next. Touched on a few of these benefits to you specifically, and this is the important bit that we're presenting to all the member councils as to what have we done and what's been the return on your investment. And I guess for Waikato, you're a larger council, but nevertheless, there's been significant benefit in terms of areas like flood protection. RSHL Holdings Limited is another construct where we are jointly securing software packages on behalf of multiple councils. Again, one contract can be had with a provider, and we can roll out far more cost effectively similar systems, similar platforms from across those member councils, and we've got a vehicle to do that. So these will build over time. What we're endeavouring to do in future reporting back to you is identify, yes, what you have received by way of funding. It's one thing, but the big one for me and for the sector is what costs have we avoided? What's the avoidance issue? So it's not always about money that comes from, say, central government or third-party sources. By working together, have we minimised or lessened the costs we would have faced otherwise? And there's numerous examples of that. So when we come to present to you in the future, in person, ideally, then we'll have more data on the investment and the money received and the return on the investment alongside money that has been avoided or costs that have been avoided to each council. We'll go next one. I think it's the last slide from memory. So just a couple of concluding comments, really. Oh no, we've got another one after this, so I'll carry on. Pretty obvious statement. Working closely together is really important, but also emphasising again, respecting the uniqueness of individual member councils to form their own pathway on certain issues where they want to. Next. So in terms of the current year, here are our key strategic drivers. If I was to raise this with you 2 years ago and say, what is the number one? Freshwater would have been the one that's the shining light. Today, the big issue facing our sector and one of our key strategic priorities is the climate adaptation space and all that encompasses. So these currently are our 5 key strategic providers. And got to acknowledge in the transport space, the leadership Chris has provided. Chris is a CE sponsor of our transport special interest group, amongst other jobs he does for us. But transport is certainly a growing portfolio, added to increasing challenges based on the Minister's announcements last Thursday around fare box recovery. But across the board, transport is an area that's getting a greater profile. Historically has kind of tended to be lost in the environmental management noise that we're focused on, but certainly now we recognise its importance. Looking ahead, yes, freshwater reform is going to be a big issue once we're clear about what the NTSFM might look like, but also RM reform is a really big challenge for us. And one of the issues that we discussed last week at the regional sector was that is it time for us to think ahead of that reform tranche 3 about what are the best roles and functions for us in the regional sector to deliver going forward, given this time of change. Some of you may be aware about 4 or 5 years ago, we, as part of the Future of Local Government panel work, the regional sector pulled together the Peter Winder Wild report, which highlighted roles and functions. The regional sector chairs and mayors have endorsed the fact, let's dust that off and refresh it, given the fact there's this live conversation around what are going to be the roles and functions, particularly in the RM resource management space going forward. But these are our key issues, and a lot of these strategic priorities will actually impact and draw on our special interest group from across the spectrum because of the nature of the not just one discipline, they're across multiple professions. So from that, we draw out our project teams with that multiple skilled resource available to us. Go to the next one. That's it. Apologies for Liz. She was going to present today instead of me, but she's had a family bereavement she's had to attend to. So I guess just to summarise, the sector is much stronger together, and the sector's voice can be articulated really well through a combined entity like Te Uru KAHIKA. In saying that, we are conscious of the need to make sure you as a member of the Te Uru KAHIKA network are comfortable with the value we provide. And that's why we want to reach out as part of this engagement to talk about that value and do so in a more formal sense into the future. So, yeah, I guess from that point of view, happy to take questions, Chair, and I'm sure there'll be a few.
Thanks for that report, Michael. I'll start off with myself first off. How many regional and unitary councils do you represent?
The only council that's not a member of Te Uru KAHIKA formally is Auckland, but informally they participate in many of our projects and fund many of our projects. So all the regional and unitary councils are members of Te Uru KAHIKA formally, and Auckland's, their CE doesn't attend our CE's meetings, but they are involved in a lot of our work, particularly the biodiversity space and flood resilience space. They're active in that space.
Thanks for that. I'll come to Ben.
I was going to ask the same question, given Auckland's pulled out of LGNZ, whether they are part of this group. But I was looking for your website. I don't know that you have a website, do you, as Te Uru KAHIKA?
Tom, we don't have one, do we?
Watch the space. It's apparently supposed to be going live in the next few days. But as of right now, no, it's not up.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
thank you. You touched on this during your presentation. My concern listening to you in your opening remarks is that you advocate for wider advocacy for the sector. You touched on the fact that LGNZ mainly focus on the TAs, and it seems to me with your presentation that you do most of what we would expect LGNZ to do And that's probably why it may have got set up all those years ago. So if I was a betting man, why would I bet on two horses when I think only one should be doing the job and winning? So I'm not usually a racing person, but using that analogy, why should we be part of both?
Yep, very good question. And ideally, we wouldn't need two entities. I guess, to be honest, I don't believe LGNZ has the bandwidth necessary to do the unique nature and work for the regional sector. In the very, very early days, I'm going back 15, 18 years, there was live conversations around the sector resourcing up LGNZ to do more of the work for regional councils, but that didn't transpire. And I guess there's a fair question to say, well, would you not be a member of LGNZ and not invest in Te Uri Kahika? The difference for me is that Te Uri Kahika has access to several thousand staff across the network. We need to understand that our special interest groups are a very powerful resource, way more powerful than LGNZ. And we have reach into those groups and we can draw on skills that are very tailored. And I just observe the way government, at a government department point of view, have engaged with us as a sector through this vehicle differently and more intensely than they have necessarily through LGNZ, which tends to be driven by more national council political type conversations. We're very much around operational delivery. We're very much around delivering, whether it be submissions or whether it be advocating for funding. It's kind of a thing that LGNZ doesn't do a lot of, is advocacy for things like funding. And that's why we picked up the mantle for things like Before the Deluge and Jobs for Nature. But it's a fair question.
If I can, a supplementary question. What would be the disadvantage for Waikato Regional Council if it was to leave LGNZ and maintaining the relationship with your organisation?
I guess a disadvantage would be that you would not have access into the wider SIG network because you wouldn't be participating in the support that we provide the SIG network. So that would be the main one. You'd be working separately and independently of the sector on advocacy issues for inter-central government, so you wouldn't have the strength of the collective regional council sector. You may actually have the strength of LGNZ and you rely on that.
But Mike, I think the question was.
Understood the question. It's the other way around.
Oh, sorry, the other way around. About not being a member of LGNZ, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
Well, all I can say to that is that a number of councils, including West Coast Regional Council, have pulled out of LGNZ. And if you got their chief executive on here, he'd say he'd like to put more money into Te Uri Kahika. He sees far more value in Te Uri Kahika than perhaps LGNZ. That's his personal view. And that is because we are very much delivering on operational need for the sector. So that has been a question that's been raised by other members about whether we put our resources into Te Uri Kahika instead of LGNZ. I guess the subtle difference here is our political leaders, our chairs and mayors are members by default of LGNZ, and that's where that connection is drawn. I guess if I'm really sort of positive about this, I think there's a win-win here for us to work with LGNZ and play to our strengths is probably the real message.
Thanks, Michael, recognising that LGNZ can't answer that question. That was a loaded question at the moment, but I'll come to Bruce online.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, Mike. I'm hoping you can hear me clearly.
Yep.
Okay, I've just got a couple of questions. First of all, your mention of special interest groups. So I wonder if you could give us sort of some background on how they are formed and what their membership looks like.
Yep. So going back to the reforms of the late 80s when regional councils were established, and then particularly when RMA 1991 was spawned, our first job as regional council was to write regional policy statements. And to be really frank, no one knew the hell what to do about it. How do you write a regional policy statement? So that was the first action of all the resource managers, policy people across our sector, our regional sector, came together right back in the early 90s to say, hey, let's work together on doing this together. Out of that spawned the first special interest group. And then as time evolved, every other discipline became a special interest group. So the consents managers from across the country, the compliance managers came up from across the country into special interest groups, and all the disciplines, as I say, navigation and safety, river engineering, the whole of scientists are all part of the special interest group, which is highlights the breadth and scope of our capacity, if you like. There were two elements to that at the time. One was it was more about professional development, it was more about how do we learn from each other in this brave new world of the 90s, and how do our scientists learn from each other, and almost like, you know, like-minded people coming together. The evolution of that moved towards, actually, we need to work together on looking at common issues and common outcomes. And that's where, I guess, the special interest groups morphed into, let's provide a network where we can advocate, we can do submissions, and we start to deliver things on behalf of the sector, which meant that not one individual council could do the work. We did it on behalf of everybody, and we all got the value of that, i.e. the cost avoidance type question. Now, as time has moved on in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, the demand and engagement by government and other agencies with us has called upon a bit of an administrative support network, which is Tū KAHIKA, which is a small lean team to work across the sector to engage in the special interest groups, but also engage into government. And I'll give you a good example of where that's been in huge demand. Ngā Kairapu, who you saw Petty on the video, they're under huge pressure and expectation. Government's ringing them all the time to get input from them on the Te Ao Māori perspectives that are affecting sort of environmental management. So that's the history. Started as a just come together. It's still live today. Those special interest groups still meet and connect, and that's really important for professional development. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of our people in the regional sector move within the sector. They might go and work for Waikato, having worked down in Wellington, and people travel around. And I think those networks are really powerful. So that's the kind of plot of history.
Yeah, so that really doesn't answer my question. So I understand that some of the history, but are you saying that all special interest groups are comprised of staff of existing councils?
The special interest groups are comprised of the staff. Yeah, so if you look at largely the managers. So if you take the consents special interest group, it'll be my consents manager, your consents manager, and consents managers from across the group. That group then appoints a convener or conveners, there could be one or two, who are then the leadership of that special interest group. So it's not all this consents people in your organisation, it's your manager or team leader or in a leadership position.
Yeah, so is this a formal collaboration between councils, or is it an informal arrangement?
It has always been informal.
Yeah.
So it's not structured, it's not a CCO, it's not a charitable trust, it's an informal arrangement that's been around for, particularly special interest groups, for a long period of time. In saying that, the special interest groups have terms of references, so they have a clear operating procedure, including things like tenure as conveners, those sorts of things. So each of the special interest group will have a terms of reference.
Thanks, Mike. I've got Chris McClay just with an input into this too.
Yeah, just to add that, Mike, some special interest groups, many also have close partners with central government who attend meetings, and also with other important stakeholders, I think, to try and achieve what we're trying to do.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm still a bit unclear on, so who's the overarching leadership? Is that the CEs of each of the councils that are involved?
So the CEs of each of the councils will be the approving authority for their staff to be on a special interest group. So absolutely. And often if someone's invited to be a convener of a special interest group, like transport or whatever there might be a change, then the CE would be supportive of that and allow that staff member to spend a bit of time to do, the convener role. But the overarching governors of Tū KAHIKA are the regional council chief executives. So Chris and myself and the other 14 or 15 of us are the ones that oversee the business plan that we have, which has those priorities which are highlighted, and oversees the budget, and then make sure the work program gets delivered.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I just would make a comment on, I'm pleased to hear that Ian Maxwell's taken over the leadership. I know of Ian's great work in the Hawke's Bay. My last question, sorry to carry on a bit, but my last question relates for Jobs for Nature and whether or not you guys are involved in trying to identify areas in relation to projects that were successfully undertaken across the country, but for which long-term maintenance and upkeep will be a crucial issue in protecting the investment that was made. I mean, are you actually making further submissions on trying to keep some of the excellent projects that were completed to ensure that the investment is protected? I'm particularly thinking about the biodiversity and biosecurity space where gains can be lost very quickly when pressure comes off and people turn their attention to other projects.
Very good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. And I'll give you an example where there's a lot of strong pressure being applied, and that's in the Wilding Pine situation. I know it's probably more relevant in the South Island, but it doesn't make any sense at all, and we've expressed this and we'll continue to express it, to have invested in progress and then say it's not a one-hit wonder. You don't just pay for it once and walk away. There is an ongoing risk here. So it's very much a live topic for us, and has been escalated to our political level as well. So there has been conversations with the Minister, and we'll continue to have those and advocate very strongly. The other good thing around Ture KAHIKA is we have access to very good communications skills, and we use that to advance our proposition externally as well about this is an important element and here are some consequences. In your patch, the marine biosecurity risk is a big one, as is Northland and Bay of Plenty. And that again is a live conversation we're advocating on behalf of the sector.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I've had more than my share. Thank you for your excellent explanations. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. And just for councillors' information, Tracy does have a diagram of the structure that she will circulate going forward. I've got two more quick questions, one from Chris and one from Jennifer. Chris.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, just one question for you, Michael. You mentioned farebox recovery's announcement last week. I'm not familiar with it. Maybe if you could care to just to explain that. And my second question is for our Chief Executive, sorry. In terms of what is the hard cash cost to regional council and time cost, and have we done a cost benefit?
I can answer the first one, and Chris will be across this as well and add to it probably later on in your meeting. But the announcements on Thursday last week is the Minister has signalled a desire to dramatically increase farebox recovery in line with more of a user pays policy. That farebox recovery target, essentially for my council and most councils, will be looking at doubling farebox recovery for PT over the next 2 to 3 years. And what's also interesting is there's also an expectation that starts in this current year, which kind of ignores the fact that we've got a budget already in place and we've got contracts in place as well. So early days, but this is in line with previous signals from the government around increased user pays philosophy. So it will impact on our PT business, no doubt, as potentially farebox recovery or farebox will double in cost to our users. So Chris will add more detail on that probably when you need to talk later on. On the issue of how much you're paying, I think Chris will have that budget. You're a larger council, so your contributions reflect that. We're reviewing the funding model. To be honest, we need to look at it. Our current approach is we have small, large, medium and small councils, and the proportion of contribution is based on that. Obviously, if you're larger, you pay more. It's a bit of a blunt tool. So we'll be looking at that as part of Tom's work around how funding sources might want to vary over time. But Chris will have that estimated budget. Fair to say, though, on budget, we never even knew how much we were paying into the special interest group for the first 25 years of its existence. It just kind of happened. It was all absorbed into just day-to-day business. We now have the ability to daylight that in a budget sense to identify what those costs are.
Thanks, Mike, and I'm sure that transport question can be raised with the Transport Committee tomorrow in their workshop. So I'll come to Chris around the budget.
Yeah, it's in the paper, just over 400K. And for that, we get a range of benefits. One is that we get the expertise from right across the country in the regional sector to help us and inform us on our work programs. We get a collaborative effort into areas of our business. But from a financial point of view, we got $12 million in grant funding from the government just last year alone. And the tranche 2 funding of that is going to be prepared for next year. So Michael talked about the Jobs for Nature and other projects where we've had significant funding, and that's largely due to the joint advocacy across the region. But it's from a qualitative point of view, the benefit that we have from being part of a SIG network and what we can leverage from that is huge. Another example I don't think Michael talked about is, should we get hit by a cyclone or some major type of emergency, the sector galvanises very, very quickly to support each other and get the experts together. It's the sort of thing that's pretty hard to put a quantitative value on, but there's a range of financial and non-financial benefits.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks the other Chris. I don't want to linger on this too much longer, but understanding it is an organisation that a number of us haven't heard from before. So I have Jennifer, Ben, and then Angela. If I can get Jennifer a mic, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate that. I absolutely love the work of the regional sector from what I've heard over the past few years. Everything you've outlined. I hope, and thank you, Michael and Tom. I hope it doesn't play it small. I hope it just grows and grows because the benefits and the potential is not just for regional councils and unitary, but just to fix some of the things this country needs to fix that the regional scale is really good at. So have loved the minutes that have come out more recently that Chair Pamela has shared with us that allows us to be a little bit more involved. But I think there is an opportunity there when there is capacity with the regional sector to look at how other councillors, not just mayors and chairs, mainly chairs, can support and get support from the regional sector. So just as an example, it was about 3-4 years ago that I identified, and I've been around 5 years now, that it'd be really a lot of learnings in the climate, and now you say climate adaptations, number one, space. And so I've been hosting regular Zoom calls with regional councillors across the country, those that were keen. It was just Coalition of the Willing, and that was really popular for a while, but quite hard to keep going when it's just you by yourself. And so maybe have a think about how those SIGs could get the best out of some of the other politicians that are out there at this level who might do some of them that joining up in advocacy work. I think from that regular, those phone calls, we at least one petition was presented to a minister a couple of years ago in the transport space, I think. But there could be much more. And then the next point I just wanted to make was the LGNZ conference is something I've been to a few times, and each time I go away thinking, man, I'd much rather go to a conference or complimentary like the community boards did this last time around, go to the conference and have a section for the regional sector to really be relevant for. Yeah, those are the main 2 points. And in the climate adaptation space, last point was we just recently had a discussion about one of the software tools, Resilience Explorer. It pains me that we might have to have a conversation in just the Waikato between 12 councils about purchasing what sounds to be like the best thing on the market. Would really appreciate some good looking into what can be done so not 78 councils have to make those decisions. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. Look, really good insights. And look, I know there's some real potential and opportunity to tap into elected members more broadly, in addition to our chairs and mayors, and hence this engagement is the first step in that process. Next year we want to come and talk to you, whether it's in the form of a workshop on some areas to engage with, but I would love personally to host a regional sector conference. We do have the regional sector tour that I think last year Chris and I, might have been the year before, Chris and I hosted your region and my region, which is a great opportunity for members to get involved, but it's quite informal. And it's something that I'm quite keen to take up with LGNZ, whether there's a half day or a day session in the conference itself for the regional sector, because there are certain things and conversations we need to have. And I sit there and I've sat through 20 conferences and I'm yet to come away feeling, hey, this is really good for the regional sector. I feel quite informed. I understand what's happening in a TA space, but I think we are our voice is not strongly expressed through the conferences, and I can understand that just based on the membership. But thanks for your insights, and we'll take it on board. Tom's made some notes, and I think we'll find ways to connect more with you as elected members and get your information and input into stuff, not just relying purely on our chief executives and chairs and mayors.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Michael and Tom. I'm sorry for talking at you. I'm just trying to go quick, and because I'm looking at the chair and I think he wants me to. Okay.
Turn your mic off. Ben, and then I'll come to Angela.
Yeah, just following up from Noel's point, council is contributing $405,199 to KAHIKA. How much do we pay towards local government New Zealand?
I think off the top of my head, about $70,000.
Right. Okay. Second point was, this is 2 years in from the last election, and we're now hearing about this great organisation. It would be really good if it could be something that was a part of the briefing for incoming councillors, and yeah, also picking up on Jen's point about something that has a sector meeting as part of, yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I think we've recognised that it's important that we reach out. Yes, we should have done it as part of the induction for incoming councils, but I think we're still developing ourselves 2 years ago as well. And even in that 2 years, we've grown significantly in terms of the expectation upon us. So we feel now is the right time. We had ideally wanted to do it earlier in the year, but things, get in the way. That's why we're going to schedule this as part of our program engagement next year in person. So note those concerns, but rest assured, Te KAHIKA will be well part of the induction program for your events next October. And I can work with each of the chief executives to tailor whatever is needed for individual councils to do that.
No. Robbie. Oh, okay. Right. Thank you very much for your presentation, gentlemen. Michael and Tom, did you want any final words, Chris, before we sign off?
No, I'd just like to acknowledge Michael's leadership in this whole space. He's taken it from a group of councils to actually working really tightly together. And as you can see, he's trying to expanding it out of a staff from a chief executive, from a chairs right across to an elected member space. So it's kind of morphing as we go. And Michael's been very much the driver behind it all.
Thanks very much. And I'm sure we will take your opportunity at some stage next year to meet up in person and just have a little bit more of a longer session, probably on the items that concern us going around in Regional Council. We have a motion in front of us to accept the report. Thank you, Pamela. Seconded. Thank you, Robbie. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. I was going to stop for a 5-minute break, but I think we'll barrel through if everybody's happy and no one really needs to belt it, because we've probably only got 20 minutes left. If everyone's happy, we will carry on. Betty?
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, Robbie, sorry.
There's one point that I don't know why, but I think both yourself and I were on the wharf in Wellington, and we're talking to Jeff Crawford, yet Northland councillors can go to their regional tour, but our councillors don't get offered. So I just wanted to put that out there. Jeff Crawford brought that up to me and Warren when we were standing on the wharf in Wellington. Why weren't we at the regional sector meeting? Yeah, so I just like to put that out there. Thank you.
Perhaps something we can pick up in the CE Councillor talk. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Thanks, Robbie. Right, our next item up is item 7.4, which is just the high-level preliminary analysis of the 2023 census. It is page 39, and we have Beat Hauser here to give us a quick overview. It is high level, understanding that the electoral information for regions isn't out yet. So you'll need, right-hand button. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are two, options for this item. One is to take it as read and open it up for any questions you may have or discussion. The second one I can take you through some couple of slides that UPA has prepared. This item was actually prepared by Upananda Paragafena, and I stepped in just to represent him. He's away today.
Councillors, how do you feel on taking the report as read and going straight to questions? Yeah. Let's whistle into questions then. Angela. No, Mikhail.
Yeah, I suppose with the report on the RSS being before this, I think this is quite prevalent, especially when we look at the population growth in the Waikato region, but more so that how much retirees are also is a huge part of that growth. I think it's about 35% of our growth is retirees. We talk about infrastructure and stuff like that, and it was all, basketball courts and stuff like that, but that's a huge part of our ratepayers, the growth in our ratepayers, the superannuation, super payees. So, yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that I took out of this, that and it is nationwide that our super is growing, retirees is growing. So I think we have to be very aware, and I bring this up all the time, is just how much our rate affordability is.
Thanks, Mikhail. Angela.
Thank you. Yeah, I found the paper quite interesting, yeah, from a region-wide point of view. Just in my own reading around just Hamilton as my constituency, Hamilton does have the lowest rate of home ownership. Seems to be a bit of an outlier within the whole region, which is fine as we're taking a really regional view. However, with housing affordability, with an ageing population, we know that with retirement, home ownership is a huge part of having a healthy retirement, and without having to rely too much on, having poverty within retirement as well. So just, just would like to keep those factors in mind as we do look at the services that we do provide. Moving forward, I think, public transport, community transport, housing affordability as well is going to be quite huge within Hamilton itself, and ageing population within the wider region as well. So, yeah, just wondering if you had any comments on the home ownership one, as well as crowded households as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of home ownership, that has been decreasing over the last 10, 20 years gradually. And actually in these figures, all the regions have increased some home ownership again. Obviously, it is not obvious in all the districts or all the SA2s. So Hamilton is a bit of an outlier. Urban areas generally have done less than more sort of rural cities and townships that have increased ownership. So it is a good sign, I guess, that we sort of have an increase in home ownership. It's that sort of self-reliance. Crowding in the Waikato especially has increased, but it's still at levels less than the national average. But yeah, crowding obviously is an issue in terms of not just infrastructure, but also health issues, physical health, whooping cough at the moment. Yeah, those sort of situations are really risky in crowded housing. The Waikato, has increased, and so we got to watch that. There are various reasons, obviously, in terms of cost of living crisis to housing affordability. Hamilton and the Waikato generally has a high sort of family ownership as well, and family houses. So there are more sort of extended families. You have a high Maori population compared to nationally. So it's certainly something that, we need to be prepared for in terms of spatial planning and facilities and services we provide.
Thanks, Stu.
Oh, no, thanks, Pat. The PT stats, and you might not know this, but do they have a mechanism to correct those, how do I put it, like clearly, Auckland could utilise more PT than say Waitomo District, if that makes sense. Do they have a mechanism to try and geographically correct those, or is it just lumped in as one? And obviously West Coast Regional Council, their PT stats, I wouldn't imagine would look that flash.
Yeah, PT, there's various statistics that are collected through the census, but also through NZTA and other agencies. And usually what we use for our Waikato progress indicators is public transport per capita.
Yeah.
So that provides at least some relativity.
Yeah.
For the census, there are two ways: education, so all the schooling and educational travels, and then travel to work. Again, 5-year frequency is not enough. So there's a lot of surveys going on in between those, NZTA mainly, in terms of travel to work statistics. But yeah, it is, in terms of PT, it is difficult to provide that relativity in terms of Waitomo's against Auckland.
Okay. No, thank you.
Ben, well, just catching this out of my eye, could you walk us through this, seeing he's done it?
Right, so this is a slide that I put in, and it refers to the Waikato projections. One of the key uses for Stats New Zealand is as an input into our Waikato projections of land use, population, and economic indicators. So this shows the Waikato population as based on 2018. We're still waiting for the 2023 based population statistics. They should have come out in October, as you have heard, I think, through the representation review. So they still haven't been out and are now scheduled for about, I think, between March and May. So this is then the start of our Waikato projections work. And we do that by TAs and by SA2's small areas. What it shows from the 2018 one, and they're projecting on a 50 years horizon, you can see the changing year above in the simulation. Waikato generally has a healthy growth over the future, especially in the next few years, as we still have that sort of immigration going on, and the decline in population through natural decline is not as obvious. We are at the transition nationally and all developed country from a growth to decline naturally. So we have aging, we have less fertility, less birth, and therefore over time we will decline naturally. What we fill in then is the only means is by migration, international migration. And so that's reflected in the last few years where we had record peak immigration. It flattens out a little bit and decreased, mainly because of more people leaving our shores than less coming in. So this reflects that over the next 20, 30 years, we still have growth consistently through probably all the areas across the region, all the districts. In some small areas, we start a decline. Thames Coromandel has the oldest age population at the moment, and this will obviously affect in terms of their population increases or relative decline. And on the other hand, future-proof Hamilton City have not only fast growth, but also a young population. Again, it will sort of probably relay and delay that onset of natural decline. So, the births more than deaths will continue longer. Any specific questions that you may have?
Just this will be useful for your projections, going ahead with the, I guess we'll see this map again shortly.
Yeah. One quick question I had, I noticed there was a heat pump question, but was there any questions around, and I did fill out the form and I don't remember, but just around solar power on houses?
No, there wasn't.
Nothing,
no,
yeah.
Yeah, just heat pumps at this stage. The number of sort of items that they have on a holding pattern, and obviously, the length of the form, how long it takes to fill it in, is a limiting factor. So they have to be quite careful about how much to add. Similar smoking rates are in, but not vaping. And again, another item that really is important now.
Have you got a question, Noel?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference on rising.
Question, not a story.
No, it's not a story. and one of the deputy directors of Justice Department said that their population projections showed that by 2050, 50% of the population would be Asian based. Is the current stats actually show that?
I wouldn't think it would be, but there's still a change. The highest increase in terms of ethnicity over the last few years were certain Asians, and then also Africa and Middle East. So those areas are increasing more than the traditional, certainly more than European, but also more than US and Canada and those traditional areas. So that's certainly something, a change. I would find it difficult to believe that by 2050, we have 50% of all immigrants will be, or all population not born in New Zealand will be Asians. No.
Yeah, thanks. And finally, Bruce online.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, it's just a comment, really. I mean, I'd like Bayard to pass a comment. I mean, basically, we still haven't got the mesh block data. And so the lovely model, which is scrolling on my screen in front of me and showing the growths, is entirely locked into existing administrative boundaries. So it's not very granular, is the point I'm making. And so there will be outlier locations, and within each of those district council areas that are actually not declining at that rate at all. And it's a very crude model, is what I'd like to say.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, and as I said, we will add the SA2s, which are population sizes of 1,000 to about 3,000-4,000. So they will include that granularity. We work with the institute at the university with Mike Cameron, that you may know, and yeah. So he is not that keen on doing projections by mesh block, simply because the error rate and the margins of error are far too great and unknowns. So we stick to SA2 as sort of the most granular one, and there will obviously be quite differences to, for example, that pattern here by districts if you add those. Yeah.
Did you say what date the mesh block data would be available, Bayard? I might have missed it.
The projections will not be available until 2026 by Stats New Zealand. What we do in the Waikato, we take the basic 2023 baseline census data adjusted by their post-numeration survey. So the best data available, and they will be released by March. And then we do, the university does their own projections using their models, more a ground up model than the top down stats model. So we include in our modeling the TA staff and their ideas about where people will live and aspirational growth areas and so on. So it will be bottom up.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thanks for your input, Bruce. Ben.
Just very briefly, constituency data, March, when's your anticipation of that?
Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah, nationally, in terms of their constituency electorates, there's a project going on for 2-3 years already, and they're published already their projections for 2026, 29, both of those, for the elections, national elections. In terms of local government, as you know, as you found out, there is not that much sort of coordination through the local government commission. And I think the key issue there is not what data to use, but the misalignment between the timing of release of the data and our 6-yearly review of the representation. My understanding is that constituency data will be able to be formulated in March, between March and May, when those data come out. So, Yeah,
and as a council, you'll note that we did submit on that very issue. So thank you very much for your fronting the report today. Happy to move. Yep, thank you, Michael. Happy to second myself. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. The next item on the agenda is 7.5, page 49, and that is the submission summary report. Standing item.
Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Murphy.
Okay, so The report gives you all the standard tables and maps. We do have an update of the fast track approvals bill. We had the list of projects come out. We've given a bit of a breakdown of what that looks like for the Waikato region. We've also got an update on the Resource Management, Freshwater and Other Matters Amendment Bill. As you may have seen, there was a last minute amendment around freshwater farm plans. So that has effectively paused that. So that's something we'll have to consider the implications of, particularly PC1, that being still a live process going on. There was also the Hauraki Gulf Marine Protection Bill. We made a submission on that. So that came in, which we're very happy about. But there was a last minute amendment to allow limited ring net fishing for a small number of fishers in protected areas to supply local communities. So we will again have to see what the implications of that is as we go forward. So in terms of new consultation, the government's consulting on some discussion papers around modernising the conservation management system. So protecting, dockland. So their intent is to support sustainable growth in tourism and regional economies. So we will be preparing a staff submission on that, and then that'll go to the legislation, at which point we will make a submission. There'll be a formal submission process. And we are expecting the RM Reform Bill 2 to come out before Christmas, and that's likely to be consulted on early next year, together with the big changes we're expecting to national direction. So there will be a fairly major submission that we will be bringing to you early in the new year. So that is all I have for you. Any questions?
Thank you. Looks like we have a couple of questions. Angela?
Thank you. Inclusionary zoning. Could you just update me where we're up to with that?
Yes. So that was an appeal on the regional policy statement. So we had a number of developer parties who had not made submissions on the regional policy statement when it was out for consultation, but they joined as 274 parties. We didn't believe that they had an interest greater than the general public, so we have challenged that. So it is with the Environment Court to make a ruling on whether those parties do have a legal standing and can be part of the appeal process. So at this point, we haven't broached the substantial matter of inclusionary zoning. So it's on hold at present.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Miguel.
Rural environment. I notice, especially for the Taupo district, because I get a lot of ratepayers ringing me lifestyle blocks with potential of councils going from 10 acres to 5 acres or 2.5 acres. Do we have anything to do with that? Can you just give me a briefing whether WRC has any submissions input into that? Because a lot of times infrastructure, or the ratepayers in those areas feel like the infrastructure isn't built for multiple properties then to go from, say if you've got 100 properties at 10 acres, then suddenly if it goes down to 2.5 acres, it's, 400 people living on an area that might not stormwater and runoff and roading and stuff like that.
Taupo District Council has recently done some plan changes that included increasing areas of lifestyle zoning, and we did submit on that process. And I believe there was recently just an appeal that we joined around a particular block of land, but the appeal has been withdrawn. So we do get involved and we do raise those issues. I don't know the specific outcomes of all of our submission points because I wasn't involved in that one, but it is definitely something that we raise with them, that putting a lot more people in those more isolated areas and the accessibility and the impact on services.
Tracy?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, while we get involved and do make submissions, we do stick to the matters that are our responsibility. Previously, we've been asked by different councils to submit on matters that are outside our responsibility, such as amenity and traffic movements on neighbourhoods. So we are very clear. We don't want to get involved in every single one, but those matters that relate to our functions, we'll submit on. Those that are not part of our functions, we steer away from. We've given our TAs very clear messages in that regard.
Sorry, Tracy, just to add, Mr. Chairman, just to add on that, what about building coverage? Like there's also looking at going from 2.5% on a lifestyle block to 10%, which is a huge jump.
So from our perspective, I mean, we're looking at the life supporting capacity of the soil and not necessarily permeable surface runoff. So changing from that, you can build hard surfaces across. We would look at it more in a catchment perspective as opposed to something down at the finer grain that perhaps our territorial authorities would, and we would have probably had input to the rezoning of those areas and their suitability for rezoning. What we do have and what we have been involved in Taupo is some of the rural lifestyle blocks unsuitability next to gullies and on pumice soils.
Ben.
Yeah, two things. The review of Te Ture Whaimana.
Yes.
Expecting a submissions period in June 2025, but there will be opportunities to be engaged from now on. This is obviously crucial to our regional policy statement. So when do you anticipate we will start to see this coming through?
So Becca are involved in that review with Waikato Tainui, and they're running that process. They haven't, I haven't seen anything to indicate when those dates will be for early engagement. Tracy may know more.
So through you, Mr. Chair, staff have had some preliminary engagement with the Te Ture Whaimana review project team. I do understand that the timeline is presently being discussed by the Waikato River Authority and the contractors undertaking the review, and it may be extended. The previous timeline that has been conveyed to us is, as Miffy's got in the paper, mid next year, but it may be toward the end of next year. Obviously, everything is moving, and expectations and availability of iwi to contribute to that process will determine that, but we will keep you posted as soon as we've had a refreshed timeline, because it obviously clicks into our freshwater plan review as well.
Does the regional council have any greater status than an ordinary person in submitting on that?
No, we don't. Just like nobody has any higher status than anybody else in our submission processes. But the deep relationship I would suggest that we've built with Waikato River Authority means the conversations we're having now, not everybody has had those at a staff level. So we don't have any status, we don't have any decision-making status either. The process is set out in the legislation, and happy to send that schedule to you if you'd like.
I know, it's just, it comes directly into our RPS, doesn't it? Whatever.
It is deemed direct into the RPS, yes.
The other one was in terms of the electoral reform issues paper from Local Government New Zealand. I see they're looking at voting methods and et cetera, 4-year terms. Have they asked for any of us to look at that, or are you going to make a submission on that? And then it relates to also the back to basics local government reform package that the Cabinet's bringing through. So there's two issues sitting there in terms of local government.
Yep, whack your mic back on. Yep.
We do have that that LGNZ one with us at the moment. It's open for submission, so we do have Marley's area, so democracy and corporate services, having a look at that to see whether there's something that we need to submit on. So I haven't caught up with her to see.
4-year term, they're trialling that in Tauranga at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the government's one, we don't. I don't think we have an updated time frame on that yet. They've got quite a full agenda at the moment. So they have signalled that they're going to make changes, but we haven't seen anything to say when that'll be.
And just finally on that, Te Ture Whaimana then, are we now expecting the submissions period to be December 2025? Does that need to be amended?
As I said, once we've had confirmation of a revised timeline, we will, but that we haven't had anything formal yet.
No.
I'm just concerned, going back to Mikhail's point of view, historically we've had some development around the city which has resulted in hard stands, the Porter subdivision in the north, and that went out through the Mangaheka drainage network. And that was completely inappropriate because of the running sands and all the difficulties in the rural drainage network being used by a city. Then we had the inland port at Tainui Port across in the east. That was to go out through the Kaumakarau stream from Hillcrest all the way to Taupiri. The drainage, Central Waikato Drainage Committee of this council got involved too late in the first because the staff didn't understand the issues. By then we got to the inland port, they certainly did, and the water was turned back into the city. Taking up Mikhail's point is that there is a time to ensure that this council gets involved. But how do we ensure the likes of the catchment groups, if you leave it to the territorial authorities only to respond, how do we ensure that the landowners in the catchment are protected from the urban developments that put water into rural drainage channels?
So if I can make a comment, we were involved with Ruakura when it was just a glimmer in Tainui's eye. We raised issues around stormwater management from our perspective from day one. We requested an awful lot of information that wasn't in initial reports. So we were involved in that, and we've involved in nearly every peri-urban subdivision or plan change to ensure that the catchment hydraulics can do what it needs to do and what it does do. And we include at the outset, when we lodge a submission, that is on behalf of the entire organisation. So we have a cross-organisational team that works with Miffy across ICM, across RUD, and we feed the information in at the outset. It's our job in our submissions to ensure that our roles and responsibilities are reflected. It's not up to us to tell our TAs how to engage with their landowners. It's up to us to make sure we are submitting on behalf of the infrastructure we take care of for our landowners. And we're pretty active in that space.
I was the chair of the Waikato Central Committee. The Mangaheka one missed the staff, and that committee got pretty proactive and banged the table and whatever. And Roger Spooner, drainage manager at the time, took these issues forward, and that's why the Tainui one was the next one off the block. Things have improved, and I take my hat off the staff. They finally got going, but initially we did it poorly. So I'm just wanting to, you pretty much said that we're now onto it, and I accept that. I'll accept that and leave it at that. But I'm just wanting to make sure that we don't miss the boat going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Noel. Point noted. Stu.
Quite sure if it's a good question or not, but with the freshwater amendment bill and the bar on notification of freshwater farm plans, hypothetically, if that happened when we were notifying PC1 to give effect to Turi Whaimana, would it effectively put a bar on that? Or I've been thinking about it. I'm not quite sure if it's a logical question or not. It probably doesn't matter, but
yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it would have had we been in the process of notifying. Government at the moment is just scratching their head because what they've realised they've done is in putting a blanket prohibition, there were some councils who were actually putting through plan changes to fix some trouble that they can't anymore. So there is some head scratching going on down in Wellington in terms of understood why it was put in, but also, hey, there's some people banging some tables looking for some plan changes to fix things that have made things more difficult. We can't put those through either. So yeah, it's an ongoing conversation between Ministry for the Environment and Ministry of RM Reform.
And in terms of the relationship to the any national direction and PC1, are you getting any vibes as to whether we're going to get a bit more understanding approach this time round that we didn't get last time?
Yes, I'm getting lots of vibes. No, none of that is giving me any comfort that there's a cogent direction at this stage. I think there's a lot more conversations that need to
Because
happen.
the last 4 or 5 MPs visits we've had over the last God knows how many years, they've all acknowledged it's an issue. So I'd like to think repeat it again, but.
Thanks. Looks like that's the end of the questions.
I had
So
one.
happy to move. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Robbie. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you're down on
I
the list.
turned my
Sorry.
mic off because sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd go back to supporting what Noel was and Mike earlier, that it's going to become a real serious issue in Manamata Piako about this, what Noel was talking about, because it's all class 1 and 2 soils. So the 28 acre blocks and smaller are going to get subdivided into 2.5 acre blocks. And I don't think they actually have to go out for reconsenting to do that. They can actually be subdivided. So it's the only way that Matamata and a few other towns in my area can increase their population without, so it's going to, what Noel was talking about is going to become quite serious. And then if you go into the adaptation plan that we're doing in the Hauraki Plains, all these are going to become hard surface runoff areas and they're actually rural land, and it's going to be actually detriment to our infrastructure. So what Noel was saying is critically a little bit more than what, it goes further than that. There is going to be hard surface areas and it's all going to be runoff going directly into our infrastructure of our flood protection. So, and that's a part of the adaptation plan we're doing. So to get to pay for these adaptation plans, there's going to be more people they're going to have more wanting to build there to pay for it. So it's all critical parts. I think it's a lot deeper and needs a lot more eyes over that space. Yeah.
I think we've just come full circle back to our spatial strategy planning. Yeah.
If I just to give councillors comfort, every district plan we've submitted on since I've been here, 13 years, has always started off with rural subdivision, fragmentation of rural land, and minimum size lots of at least 20 hectares with consent notices on titles such that they can't be further subdivided. So do we need to run ahead of it? Yes. Have we? Yes. Is it going to be more and more pressured for us? Yes. So it's definitely a live issue and one that Miffy has the pleasure of sitting in Environment Court mediations with developers trying to hold the line.
Well, all I mean is that it's fine to subdivide, but I want them paying the contribution they need to put into the system. That's the issue. And when they get in for free and don't contribute, that's a real problem.
And just on that, councillors, at the moment, regional councils are not able to take development contributions such as TAs are. That's a conversation that we're having down in Wellington with certain ministers to say, we think, because of exactly what you've identified, Councillor Cookson, we need to start taking those development contributions that we haven't towards our drainage and flood management.
Thanks for that, Tracy. Robbie, anything else for Miffy? Excellent. Happy to, thanks. Mikhail, myself, yep, done. No, perfect. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. We now have a motion to move into public excluded. I'm happy to move that. Seconder, thanks, Jen. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. I'll just give Dave a moment to shut everything off.